Hey there, everybody. It's Paul Roberts here, and we're going to start a. It's Paul Roberts from the Security Ledger, and we're going to start our Security Ledger Hangout talking about secure Agile development. In just a couple minutes, we're going to give folks a few minutes to log on and tune in. And so I ask you if you're logging on, just to stay tuned, and we'll kick off the conversation in about 2 minutes from now. So stay tuned. Okay, welcome back. We've got a good audience there, and so we're going to get things going. Obviously, we might have some people join us a little bit late, but I want to welcome you to another Security Ledger Hangout. I'm your host, Paul Roberts, the editor of the Security Ledger. And you know, if you're a regular reader of my blog, that application security or application insecurity is really at the forefront of challenges that are facing sophisticated organizations today. Security vulnerabilities that are introduced during the development cycle with applications are a leading source of compromises and theft of sensitive data, often problems like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and so on. Pressing problem for organizations is how to produce more secure code before they ship a product so they aren't in a position of having to address security holes after a product's already shipped and they have customers who are affected by that or harmed by that. But today we're here to talk about implementing secure development lifecycle processes in Agile Scrum development environments. Agile, as you know, is really becoming the dominant methodology for software development. And to walk us through the process, we have two gentlemen who have been in the trenches implementing security into a very sophisticated Agile development operation, Veracode Inc. Pete Chestnut is the director of engineering at Veracode. He's been with the company for about 8 years. Started out as an individual contributor there, and now Pete heads up Veracode's platform team. He is also the lead on a aptly named Project Purina that is designed to get Veracode to eat its own dog food, in other words, use its own technology and platform to make its software more responsive to customers. Veracode makes an application security testing platform product. Ryan O'Boyle is a lead security researcher at Veracode. He's been there for 3 years, and his responsibilities include product security for Veracode's entire product suite. And he basically is in a position to make sure Veracode adheres to the same secure development principles that the company helps and advises other companies to follow. So Pete and Ryan, welcome to the Security Ledger Hangout. We're thrilled to have you. Good. Can you hear me, guys?
Yep. Can hear you now. Yeah, thanks for having us.
And Pete, you with us? Oh, okay, Pete's not with us. Okay. Well, Pete, let us know when you're there. Are you there? Okay. I'm like a sound issue. Okay. Well, let's go ahead. let's go ahead, Ryan, with you. Let's just talk a little bit, I guess, about defining terms. Ryan, there are a lot of organizations that do Agile development or who say they do Agile development. We're an Agile development shop, but they may not be doing kind of proper Agile development, or they may be doing some kind of a hybrid between Agile and more traditional forms of development. So give us your take on, when we're talking about Agile and Agile Scrum in particular, what are we talking about?
Yeah, so first off, Agile and Scrum are two different but related concepts. Agile is an overarching philosophy. If you search, you can find the Agile Manifesto that kind of sets out the foundation of what an Agile software development methodology would be. Scrum is one specific methodology that falls into the Agile group of development methods. But you do see a lot of so that's the perfect world version of these concepts. The reality is that a lot of organizations pick and choose and maybe use some of the Scrum concepts, but merge them with other Agile methodologies. Like, we've heard of something called Scrum Ban, which is like a combination of some Scrum concepts, but using the Kanban board style tool, or Scrum Fall of doing sort of a hybrid between waterfall methodology and, again, incorporating some Scrum concepts. Pete, if your audio is working now, do you have anything to add?
Okay. Well, okay. We're working on Pete's audio. So is that? I guess the question is it a? So in order to, are those hybrid models equally effective as kind of proper or strict Agile Scrum when it comes to implementing secure development processes?
I would say that probably any specific one is probably not inherently more suited to incorporating security versus another. Mm-hmm. I see that the one of the challenges that I've dealt with personally is if we have multiple teams with multiple methodologies, then finding the right ways to integrate with those teams can be a little bit of a challenge, versus if every team in your organization is doing Scrum and they're adhering to Scrum perfectly, it's going to be easier to identify the ways you're going to incorporate security into that process and have them apply across your entire development organization. I don't know if it's actually, I mean, we're a growing but still fairly small organization. So if you're talking about a really large enterprise, there's probably almost no chance that they're going to be able to maintain that level of uniformity.
Right, understood. And Pete, are you with us? No, you're not. Okay. I would say drop off and then maybe join back in. I'll invite you back in. Yeah. Okay, so talk Ryan, just a little bit about some of the problems that come up. Folks have said, Agile is in some ways not antithetical to security, but it can make security, at least as it's traditionally been done in the development process, more difficult or more challenging. Why is that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're used to the traditional model where there's a planning phase and then multiple phases that could each be a month, and the product is only being shipped once a year or once every 6 months or on some long cycle,
right?
Then the traditional model of handling the main security review of that,
right,
at the end, could that could work. You were still looking at the security of the product as frequently as it was shipping. If your development organization now is moving to a process where one of the goals of Scrum in particular is that at the end of every sprint, you have a potentially shippable product. That doesn't mean you're going to ship it, but it means you could. So if your development organization is working with that mindset, and
Right.
they're moving towards being able to ship, every week, every 2 weeks, or every day, multiple times a day,
Right.
but you're still thinking you're going to do a pen test or a big, huge code review once a year or once every 6 months, there's a big gap there between how frequently the code is going out and how frequently you're looking at it for any security defects.
Right. Okay, Pete, I think you're with us. Are you with us?
Can you hear me this time?
Oh my God.
Oh,
Your voice is like music to my ears. Welcome back. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Because we're really tired of hearing Ryan talk.
Yeah.
No. So Ryan was just we were talking just about the variations on agile development processes and these kind of hybrid agile models, and then kind of the challenges that agile presents to security, kind of traditional security as part of the application development process. Could you tell us just a little bit, because you've been at Veracode a long time, kind of how Veracode evolved in its thinking about how to both adopting Agile and then how to integrate secure development into its Agile process. So what was the evolution within Veracode of both development to moving to Agile and then getting security as an integral part of it?
Sure. So to start off, I want to say that we have always had security as our first job. That's what we call our job one.
Right.
So we use our platform to secure our platform. We do scans of our application on every release. We do pen tests. When we first started doing Agile about 3 years ago, we had it broken up. It was more like an Agile fall. So we would do story development and build product, and then at the end we would do hardening sprints where we would start to look at the security of the application through our static analysis, find problems, and then iterate over that. It became clear that needed to be a first-class partner of completing the story. So in the same way that we think of quality as being the gate for releasing your code into the trunk, we also want to say that security is. So it becomes part of our definition of done for all of our stories.
Okay, and just I assume folks who are tuning into this are pretty familiar with the Agile terminology. But when you're talking about stories, you're talking about what? I mean, that stories correspond to what in kind of traditional development talk?
So pieces of work, call it a feature.
Right.
In Agile, they use terms like as a user or as a security program manager, I want to, and then describe the problem that you're trying to solve.
Right. And so development ends up being a collection of these user stories, basically. Here's a feature or something I want to be able to do that then get selected and worked on and hopefully completed by the end of the cycle.
That's exactly right. And my definition of done, that's another Agile term. When you think about what does it take to complete something, so in these stories are acceptance criteria, and what we internally think of as the work that we need to do, and that includes automated tests, and security tests.
Right. So Veracode ended up, you went through a couple different iterations of sort of how to interleave security with your Agile Scrum development process, but you ended up really security is often appended to development. It's you QA test it, and maybe security is part of QA quality assurance testing it, or you do some pen testing. Maybe once you have a build in place and before it ships. You guys actually ended up making security a pretty integral part of the early on in the Scrum process, as you were looking at stories and almost before the selection of individual stories to make part of the sprint. Can you talk about why that is and why you found it more effective to put security kind of at the front load it or make it involved early on? Pete? Yep.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's fine. Yep. Sorry. Go. Just start over.
Right. So Ryan and I would sit before we took stories into the sprint, and we would talk about the different stories, what you might need to worry or protect about. I'm getting an echo on my mic here. Turn this down. All right. We would talk about the different stories and what the security aspects of those were, whether they were input related, what the threat modeling might be on those, if there are things that we needed to pen test specifically. So we would go into the Scrum meeting having a good understanding of which things had security implications on them. And I'll let Ryan jump in on that one.
Yeah, this was something that we iterated on when I first was getting involved with with one Scrum team in particular that I think was fairly new to be doing Scrum on that part of the development organization. I was sitting in the planning meetings, which, after spending some time there, determined this actually wasn't early enough. The stories had already been groomed at this point. The point of this meeting was not to talk about the technical details, never mind the security details. It was more about what are we actually going to do during the next, I think it was a 2-week sprint. It may have been a little longer at that time. So that's when we shifted from having a security presence just in that planning meeting to Pete and I meeting one-on-one after that planning meeting to go through and say, okay, these are the stories that the development team is committed to work on during the sprint, and then we would go through and identify those security requirements. One of the things we've done, though, is we've brought in some Scrum training, since that's what we were standardizing on, and fortunately we were able to have some representatives from security attend Scrum Master training and be even more familiar with the process that the development teams were using. And that's when we realized this wasn't the right place based on how Scrum is supposed to work, because we realized by doing this after the planning meeting, we were changing the requirements of the story after the development team had already estimated the amount of work involved, had already committed to doing what they thought the amount of work was during their sprints. And we realized we need to move even earlier. So now we're at the very beginning of the process and frequently at the very end of the process. So before anything even gets to planning and brought into a sprint, we participate in a grooming process, either in the team's normal grooming or in the, now the echo has moved to me. Either during the team's grooming session or during a special security grooming session that we hold just with the product owner or select representatives from the development team, and we identify those security requirements before they've been fully pointed, before they've been actually brought into a sprint. And then we also can identify who the security researcher is that's going to do the security consultation, if it's more of that, or the code review or a pen test. We can identify that before it even gets into the sprint, so that the developer that owns the task for making this and testing it knows who their security contact is going to be throughout the whole process.
And that individual who is meeting with the development, with the project lead in advance, what are their skill sets? What are those conversations like? And are you going through, literally all of the potential stories and assessing them for security? So what is that assessing them for their security impact, and how do you do that in a way that sort of holistically look at a task and say, okay, that has security impact or that doesn't? I mean, what are the metrics that you use to do that?
Yeah, so first off, in terms of scoping it, we plan it by either being in that meeting or doing it right after the team's grooming meeting. We're making sure we're looking at the things that are soon to be worked on. When we do it in the team meeting, there's an advantage there of having the entire development team that's participating in grooming, at the disposal. So from the security perspective, I or one of the other researchers that participates in grooming they kind of have that sense of, okay, this has to do with authentication or authorization, or there's crypto, or they're adding something new that we've never looked at before. They have that security sense, but then it's always partnered with someone from the development team that knows the product and has the in-depth technical expertise of that particular product that that particular team works on. So anytime we do grooming, we always have both of those perspectives working together to determine if there's specific acceptance criteria related to security.
And one of the things that we're doing to augment that is to build a what we call a security champions program. So inside of the Scrum team, there will be a person on that team that is responsible for looking at the overall security of the application in conjunction with those security researchers. We have a very talented security research team, but they only scale so far. You get past the number of individuals, that becomes harder. So Brian has built a program around training them to be more in tune with the security requirements and how to test for those. We have regular capture the flag exercises that Brian runs to augment their skill set.
And actually, I want to just break away for a second and remind the audience, if you're on the line. So we are taking questions. There's a Q&A app. If you kind of look at there's a little Q&A button, and if you click that, you can pose questions to us, and I will make sure that we get to those questions before the end of the Hangout. So just a reminder to the audience: if you've got questions, go ahead and ask them. Use that Q&A feature to do it. Okay. Pete, that last comment about the security champions kind of brings up one of the other big questions or challenges that I'm sure the audience has, which is, you guys are Veracode. You are overflowing with amazing security talent because at your roots you're a security company, and so security was part of things very early on in development of your platform. Other companies don't have that depth of security expertise. So how many people do you need? What's the ratio, for how many people do you need, and what types of skill sets do you need to carry this off? If you've got a 7 or 8 person Scrum team, how many security people do you need to manage to work with that team, and what's the ratio of regular developers to security experts that you should be hiring and bringing on?
Sure, so that's a great question. So that's the reason that we came up with this initiative for the security champions, is to train regular developers in security practices, because our research team, well, that's their name. They do research. They're out and looking at the cutting edge of security. They're not involved on a day-to-day basis with our Scrum teams. So by providing that training, that allows us to scale better. So it depends on how much of a training program you're willing to have. Now, from the Veracode platform standpoint, we have people that help our customers with those security aspects, so we can get on the phone with them and talk them through their problems. So that's part of the way that we help them to scale, is by providing that security expertise. But from an internal perspective, that's why Ryan has these capture the flag outings where we try to figure out, well, all right, how would I attack this? So it helps you think about those best practices. Also with our automation, which we'll touch on a little bit later, that gives us that feedback as well. So when we do our static analysis, that gives a developer immediate and constant feedback about what they're doing and how they're doing it. So that feedback loop and our training programs really help to scale that team.
And Ryan, tell us just a little bit about this capture the flag exercise, and just Pete mentioned that. Could you explain how that works?
Yeah, so that's something that we started doing for the security champions, and also this being the company that it is, there's some general interest in capture the flag competitions and stuff as well. So we decided to start doing a regular session. It's every week on Tuesdays. I'll be running it shortly this afternoon, and it's a chance for in particular these security champions to come together and have dedicated time during their week where they can focus on learning about security and going through these actual exercises. Sometimes, as with anyone who's done any of these CTFs can see, some of them are very contrived. Some of them can be much more grounded in something in the real world. But we're focusing on the ones that have a practical angle and the ones that have a leveling system where you can start with something pretty basic and then move into more advanced attacks. And we also try to find the ones that aren't just about the attack, but also about understanding why the attack works. So in particular, like there's some that share source code where you can go through and find the source and first figure out what's the flaw based on looking at the code, and then figure out, and then how could you go on from there to exploit it. And we also, in addition to the CTFs, we, for the security champions, have a monthly meeting where we get together, and we've done this about 4 or 5 times, I think, so far, and it's been really good that we've been able to see a shift in more of the developers, more of the security champions coming to that meeting with, we call it the birds of a feather, so they can come to that and share what they've been working on that's related to security and what processes they've found work with their development team around incorporating these security requirements, or some of the documentation that they're using to be able to do some of the security grooming themselves as they ramp up on security expertise.
Right. So I mean, what the impression I'm getting is there's really almost kind of an apprenticeship model that goes on here, where you are kind of pushing down security skills and security expertise in a variety of ways to people who might not have been hired on necessarily as security hires, right? And kind of devolving that. So I guess in theory you start maybe with a small core security team, security experts, but then really try and push down some of those skills. What are some of the skills that lend themselves to, we don't need somebody who's a 10 or 12-year security expert to do this. This is something that we can devolve to, again, a security champion or somebody who's just part of the development team. Either one of you can take that question on.
Yeah, well, the first and foremost, the security champions program that we've put it together is volunteer driven. So that's one huge element, is finding the developers, or it's not just developers, it can be developers, testers, with it being a cross-functional development team. Finding the ones that are really interested in this is the first step. So making sure you've got the right people that are going to embrace this and really want to learn about security. That's number one. But then in terms of the skill set, it's applicable to anything the development team is doing. So if it's someone whose primary focus and responsibility is development, then they're just as eligible as someone whose primary focus is on testing and automating test cases, because we don't write acceptance criteria just around the development. We also write it on the testing to say, that if this is a story that has potential authorization issues, we want automated tests to monitor and make sure that we're not just making sure things work, but making sure that things don't work in the ways we expect them, and that so yeah, I'm going on a little bit of a tangent, but really anyone who's has that interest and that curiosity and that passion for learning about security, I think they're going to be able to adapt that to whatever their role in the development process is.
Yeah, I think if you look at the top exploits, they're ones that are very simple to guard against. You just need to be mindful of them. So from a champion's point of view, once you start looking at the security of your application, you can see trends in SQL injection And it's something that should be easily stamped out. Just people need to be thinking about it up front. So those kind of things don't require a ton of expertise, and they're easy to see and protect against in most cases. So that's an area where they could be very novice in the security aspects, but provide a lot of value to their company.
That's so good answer. I wanted to just remind the audience again, if you have a question for Pete or Ryan, use that QA button and feel free to pose a question to us. I promise I will get to it before the end of the Hangout. So we are taking questions from the audience, and we will answer them. So use the QA feature. Pete, you guys have used, in the process of kind of refining and developing Vericode's secure agile program, realized that obviously development resources were scarce and valuable, and that there were kind of some inefficiencies in the way that you guys were doing things. One of the things you guys are really focused on is using automation wherever possible to try and reduce the load on the development team, let them focus on the really high-value tasks. What are some things that you guys have been able to automate, some tasks that are integral to secure development but maybe don't need to be manually done?
Right, so this really speaks to the Project Purina, things that we used to what we call automate with people. So the entire build process, the upload and scan process, pulling down results, those are things that don't require human interaction. A lot of companies, especially ones that have adopted Agile, are moving towards continuous integration or continuous delivery. And in those systems, there are automated processes that build, run unit tests, run automation tests. So for us, it was a natural extension to say, let's add the security testing in there as well. So on a nightly basis, we are testing the trunk of our code to validate the security of it. Each developer is also doing the same thing with their code before they check it in, and that happens right in their IDE. So part of the automation is sitting in the tool set that the developers are used to, and that's how we've been able to really ramp up our velocity by not doing silly things like taking a build and doing an upload into our cloud service.
And do you have any metrics, or can you give viewers a sense, what types of efficiencies you've been able to realize as a result of that, or how that's affected, your ability to both iterate more quickly but also not sacrifice security?
Sure. So those nightly scans are also imported into our Jira ticketing system, so we see the security problems early in the process. In the Agile fall that I alluded to before, we would see them with 2 weeks left to ship, so everyone would scramble to go figure out, are we going to remediate this flaw, or is this one a mitigation that we're going to propose for this? And then our security experts would come in at the end, and it would be a race against time to get those things sorted. Now we do that on a daily basis. They show up in our dashboards as what we call release blockers to say, hey, this needs to be addressed. So by having that automation occur, instead of saying, I forgot to go run the scan, those things now happen automatic. So we've saved probably man days a month easily with all of the uploads and the downloads of information, and then bringing those to the team through email or what have you. These are now all automated processes that happen every night.
And you guys, Vericode, in the process of doing this, so I mean, I'm hearing a couple things. One is that security needs to become part of the criteria that are necessary, that need to be met, or the conditions that need to be met before, let's say, a story can be considered complete, right? So in some agile development shops, maybe security isn't considered part of what the criteria that need to be met for a particular feature or task being considered done. So that's one. The other is that you really needed to structure a security team that in some ways sort of mirrored your agile development team with kind of similar roles interfacing in similar ways between owner and develop, and then kind of the developer or worker. Could you talk about how as you went through this, the shape that your security team started to take? Ryan or
yeah, I'll take that one. So through that sort of story of how we first started having security representation, in some of the meetings, we just kind of had, okay, someone from security, and most of the time it was me, go to this planning meeting and be their security resource. And this was as we were just starting to try to figure out how to formalize this, but there wasn't any sense of what the particular role was there. We were starting this process, and being in that environment and being exposed to Scrum, the process that the team was using, and learning about Scrum and learning of the different roles, that's when I saw that there was a parallel there between what I was doing and two different roles within Scrum, one being the product owner and the other being just a member of the team. The product owner is responsible for the backlog and for the product and making the decisions about what's going to happen, what's the top priority, and facilitating the grooming process, setting those requirements. And that was one piece of it. It was that security needed a voice in those conversations to say, these are the security requirements. And the other piece was doing the actual work, doing the code review, doing the pen test, reviewing some of the static results. Those were more technical and paralleled what the developers and the testers were doing. So we started using the terminology of the security architect as something that corresponds to the Scrum product owner, and the security engineer as someone who is assigned to one particular development story. And that also gave us the model of having one person in that security architect role with each Scrum team, which helped to build a relationship there and build up some product knowledge for the security researcher acting as the architect role. And the security engineer was something that could be more distributed based on availability, based on skill set and expertise. So that's something that also helped us scale. So if you look at Scrum, there's three roles. There's the product owner, there's the team member, and then there's also the Scrum Master, who is, while the product owner is focused on the product, the Scrum Master is focused on the team and helping to facilitate the process. And we kind of noticed that there interesting, we have a parallel to 2 out of the 3 of these Scrum roles. What about that third one? And in a sense, it's maybe not quite as perfectly analogous, but the security champion role is kind of in that Scrum Master role. The goal is for them to become, a security expert, part of the team, and is going to focus on security practices and the security issues for that team, the way the Scrum Master is looking at that team and how their process is going. Yeah.
Right. So when you say you have so you've got really the owner, the Scrum Master, the security champion, and then the developer or security engineer. When you say you've got a security architect, that implies that you have some kind of an overall security architecture, or that you have some overall vision or plan for your security that is strategic and not tactical. In other words, these are ideas or methods or standards that we're going to apply uniformly across our product suite, regardless of what particular component we're working on or particular feature we're dealing with. Is that true, or is it more just I'm a master of ceremonies for security? I guess, Pete, maybe you'd be the guy to handle that question.
So part of this is implemented inside of the Veracode platform. So the research team has done a very thorough job of analyzing every product from a threat standpoint, and has instituted policies. So those policies talk about, for some companies it might be PCI compliance is where they are worried, OWASP, it might be particular CWEs, it could be wide swaths of vulnerabilities by severity. Those are the things that our security research team has put in and said, here's the bar for you to deploy. If you don't have any of these vulnerabilities, then the product is ready to go. So we augment that with pen tests and security code reviews, but that's the first level bar of helping the developer understand that they're ready to deployment. It's not a conversation with a security expert, but it's something we bake into the process so they understand what things the security team is worried about.
Okay, we have a question from the audience, so I'm gonna pivot to that. This is from Scooter. What types of security tests have you successfully automated and have running consistently in CI mode? What specific security tool sets does Veracode provide to facilitate this? If not automated tests, what other governance does the Veracode suite provide?
So from a governance standpoint, we're talking about those policies. The things that we have automated are static analysis, which again we do nightly. Once we have release candidates, we also do dynamic analysis, which is, you can think of it as an automated pen test, a poor man's pen test. So we do that on a pre-release candidate to validate that the product is working in an interactive case as well as the static analysis. So by doing that nightly, we evaluate ourselves against policy, so we see early on whether or not the security team is ready for this product to go out into the field.
Okay. One of the issues that I'm sure that I know Veracode's run across, many organizations do, is how to scale security with their development organization, given that, for example, with you guys, you're growing very rapidly, your development team is growing rapidly, your product suite is growing rapidly. Scrum is a development method that is very well adapted to that and very kind of nimble in the way that it can self-organize. But as your various Scrum teams multiply, and given that your security team is probably going to grow slower than that, how do you manage that? How do you keep the accountability and also, not overwhelm your security team?
So I think part of it is based in education. So we have programs in our enterprise to talk about if you're a Java developer, here are the things you need to be aware of in the Java platform that are prevalent. If you're a web application developer, if you're a mobile developer. So we provide a lot of that training to our individual engineers so that they can be conscious of it. In the same way that you think about best practices from a development standpoint, that becomes one of their best practices. You build that in, and then you measure the team for the kinds of vulnerabilities that they tend to introduce to their daily work, and you fine-tune your education process that way. So that's one of the ways we attack it. I'll let Ryan jump in on the rest of the question.
Yeah, I'll also say, so as far as scaling, part of why I think the Security Champions program is attractive to the development teams, because one of the issues is saying like, oh, you want to give us more work, you're supposed to be security, why aren't you doing this? But it's supposed to be a partnership between security and development to work together to make a secure product. And there's a tension anytime you have a Scrum team that's supposed to be self-contained, but you have an external dependency. So if you have something that's required, some expertise, or some process that Scrum team is development that is dependent on, but it's an externality, there's a tension there. And part of why this is attractive is if you have a team that's doing Scrum or another Agile process and they're interested in moving faster, in pushing product more frequently, they're going to recognize that security is one of those external dependencies unless they have the security expertise on the team. Most of the time, you're not going to be able to find, Chris Ang has always liked to joke that anytime he's asked the development for, a headcount to put a full-time security representative on a development team, they respectfully decline because their number one priority is development. So unless you can find someone that has that perfect development skill set you're looking for and also has security expertise already, means you need to find a way to grow that expertise on the team so that you don't have that external dependency on another organization.
Right. Those tensions between desire to get the product out and security kind of being perceived sometimes as a hindrance to that. So let me just remind the audience one more time. We're coming up on the quarter hour, and we are taking questions. There's a Q&A app. If you want to click on it, you can pose questions, and Pete and Ryan will take a swipe at answering them. So just a reminder to you, if you've got questions, go ahead and pose them. Pete, one question that comes up is, obviously, many companies that are migrating to Agile development from kind of more traditional development models, obviously they've got a lot of legacy code, they've got a lot of, let's just say, security backlog of issues that are in there that they need to work through. So one question might be, how do you make that migration from your existing development paradigm to this secure Agile paradigm, and how do you address those security issues that predate your move to Agile?
Sure, and I think it has a larger context in it's not just moving to Agile, it's also moving from a place where you weren't worried about or thinking about security as a first-class partner in development, but as something that you need to bake in. So sure. It's really about measurement. So the first step in any of this is to measure. Let's see what the problem is, and then enable the team to not make the hole any deeper. So for the customers that come on board from that aspect, whether they're using Agile or some other methodology, it's about getting the knowledge in front of them, and then working with their development teams, with their security teams, to figure out how to migrate that process in, how to ease the development team into this. Part of it is, like I said, this automation. If it's inside of their tool chain, if you allow them to check these things, it's not necessarily about going and fixing that backlog of sometimes hundreds of security vulnerabilities, but let's not introduce the next one. So helping them to build that into the pre-check-in portion to say, hey, I'm going to scan this. Are there any vulnerabilities in it? Let me fix the ones that I just introduced, and then you can start to look at building a more mature program about eating back through that backlog. It's no different than technical debt. Every company has quality defects that sit in their backlog forever. It's the same thing with security. You need to build a program and build some methodologies around eating back through those at some rate. So getting the problem in front of you is the first step, and then just, like I said, chip away at it.
Ryan, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And one of the things we've seen is by getting more involved in like the grooming process, that's also a place where, representing security, we can advocate for some of those, some of that security debt that may not always be visible. If you're participating in grooming, you're a voice there to the product owner or product manager, depending on what the methodology you're using. But you're at that table. You can, if there's an issue that's a security debt that's potentially high risk, or just now's the time that it should be done, think you have a better chance of accomplishing that as a security practitioner if you're one of those voices that's contributing to where this product is headed and trying to get that out of the backlog and actually done.
Okay, we've got a question, just it's a little bit of a higher level question, not security specific, but how do you avoid falling into a hybrid agile waterfall development model versus true agile? So that kind of slippery slope where you've got, you know, you're moving to agile, but maybe you end up with this kind of hybrid model. Or how do you stay out of that?
So that's one of the areas that we started with, right? So we had that agile methodology to develop, and then we had an agile methodology that bolted on the end of it to do our security portion of it and our release criteria. It really needs to be folded in and thought of as a first-class citizen in the same way that developers write unit tests, the same way that developers test their code. It can't just be from a functional and a quality standpoint. It needs to be from a security standpoint. And the more that you educate your developers on how to do that properly, the more that becomes part of their daily routine and not something where I switch context now and now I'm a security guy versus I'm a developer. A developer has to be aware of the quality aspects, the functional aspects, the security aspects. It becomes another tool in the toolbox that they use to build their code, and through that, those education programs and that constant feedback, they just get better at it, and it becomes inherent in what they do.
Yeah, and like Pete was saying, it's from the security perspective, it very much parallels the quality assurance testing that you're already doing, presumably, as within that sprint boundary, there's a tension of the developer needs to write the code, but then there also needs to be the testing. In the same way, the security testing needs to happen and have enough time to file a bug report for any findings that there are and have them fixed before the end of the sprint. But so it's that same, I don't think that with security it's any different than with any other testing that may need to happen during that shortened time frame.
Okay, we're coming up on the end of the hour, so we're going to need to wrap up. Before we go, I wanted to ask, for folks who are listening, are there any tools out there or resources that, again, Veracode has done this internally. This is, you guys are talking actually from experience, not just from the perspective of Veracode and its products. So are there tools, resources, methodologies that you can recommend to folks out there in the audience to say, if you're interested in really pursuing this Agile SDL, here are some things that you should really look at or consider. Veracode software, of course, being one of them, but other stuff as well. Pete?
So mine is more of a, as I talked about the quality, it's about getting this, building the software expertise into the developer, about doing those code reviews, about doing all of the things that are best practices from a development aspect. So when our developers do peer reviews, we don't just look at it from a, did you put your curly brace in the right place, or are you doing the right naming convention? It's, hey, I see right here you weren't protecting against this threat. You need to be aware of that. Where in the process, where can that fit into your development organization? Make them champions themselves of security, and not as, like I said, as a separate process.
Ryan?
Yeah, I would say that it's not about any one particular tool or one particular process. It's about forming a relationship between security and development. That's something that historically has not always been the best relationship within organizations for reasons on both sides. But really what I think is unique about what we've accomplished here is forming that partnership. And my strongest recommendation for the security folks out there is not any one particular tool or any one particular process. It's talk to your development organization, find out what tools they're using, find out what processes they're using, and go from there and figure out what the right place is for their tools, their processes, and overall your organization are the right places to introduce security.
Right, and if you're seen as a partner, so one of the things that I love about our security research team, our security team in general, is that they're practical. So even though we may have a finding in our code, we talk about not only the how to fix it, but the when to fix it. It's not always a stop ship on the product. If it's seen as a insurmountable wall, especially when you do that first assessment, you could be overwhelmed and say, well, we clearly can't get at this problem at all. Our security team says, well, all right, that is important, but not urgent. We're going to release the product. We're going to quickly follow through with a fix to this. Here's how we might mitigate it before we go out the door with it. So it's not it's a cooperative relationship where they understand in the same way that you don't ship bug-free code. There are features that have little warts on them. That stuff is going to happen, and if you're seen as a partner to the developer and not, the traffic cop that's going to come in and write them a ticket, then you have much better relationship.
Okay, so cultural education trainings within your organization, really leveraging the talent you've already got on board, but kind of carrying them over into this new way of doing things, I guess, is what I'm hearing from you, more than any particular tool or platform to help you do it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Well, listen, Pete and Ryan, thank you so much for taking the time to come and do the hangout with me. I really appreciate it, and we got a lot of people on the line viewing, so I think you were heard today. And we'll be sure to do it again. This is a big topic, both secure development and secure agile, so I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to talk about some of this or some aspect of this again. I thank you for taking the time this afternoon.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you both. We were talking today about securing agile development, how to integrate secure development lifecycle processes into your agile Scrum development. And we had Pete Chestnut, the Director of Engineering at Veracode, with us, as well as his colleague Ryan O'Boyle, who's a lead security researcher at Veracode. Gentlemen, thank you both, and thanks to everybody who joined in, who asked questions, and stay tuned. Keep your eyes peeled for our next Security Ledger Hangout. Bye, everybody. Have a great day. Take care, Pete. Take care, Ryan.
Thanks.